Radio, Webster, Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Norway dropping out of the attack coalition. The Netherlands, no more bombing. Big problems for Berlusconi in Italy with his right-wing opposition from the Northern League. And by the way, this is how it works. If you look at that manifesto group, that bunch of pathetic fakers, as I've been calling them now for, 40 years, Manifesto is now basically cheerleaders for NATO, cheerleaders for the attack on Gaddafi. Really ignominious stuff. And then here in the United States, right, the fact that you've got the Republicans and essentially it's an alliance of Republicans with anti-war Democrats, and if they could just get a little bit more gumption, they could begin to cut off the funding. Now, if you cut it off in the House of Representatives, that does not maybe do the job. It really should. If you don't pass a bill, if you pass a bill saying we cut off the funding, and if you don't pass an affirmative appropriation saying we're going to appropriate and then authorize a certain amount of money, that should end it. But what Obama does is he steals money from different accounts inside the Pentagon. That may be impeachable, right, if you're trying to frustrate the will of Congress. But remember, in a situation where Obama's a Democrat, the Senate's dominated by Democrats more or less, and the Republicans only have the House, if you continue to defy the House, what can the House do to make itself respected? Well, they can impeach you. And I think that's where they should go. Above all, because we're well into a flagrant violation of the War Powers Act. Obama is impeachment bait as of June 20th, and now we're 17, 18 days beyond that point. We get in the Washington Post of today and in National Pentagon Radio, some of these correspondents I've seen in action. The Washington Post says that they've captured some African fighters from Mali and Niger. These are now the rebels, right? The Al-Qaeda rebels of Libya have captured some people from Mali and from Niger, and they're making them available to the international press. And I think this is a real wretched exercise in Goebbels propaganda. This is now the Washington Post, Friday, July 8th, today. On page A7, captured Gaddafi troops say morale and supplies are low, and regime reported to be relying on foreign fighters in battle with rebels. So this is the black African mercenaries that they started with. However, look inside the article. The men's accounts could not be independently confirmed. Rebel jailers told the detainees they were free to speak to reporters who arrived at the jail unannounced, but gave them the option to decline, and then be executed when the it looks like it was NPR and our dear friend Ernesto Londoño of the Washington Post, who is running around cavorting with the rebels. Isn't this interesting? I think most of this is simply propaganda to hide the fact that the coalition is what is falling apart, as I've just been telling you. As of Monday already, Monday, July 4th, if you picked up your copy of La Presse de Tunisie, as I did, the Press of Tunisia, La Presse de Tunisie, 4th of July, the headline is, "The rebellion prepares the siege of Tripoli." Well, that's 4 or 5 days back there. The rebellion prepares the siege of Tripoli, and this has not happened yet. They've essentially, the rebels apparently have taken over some places in these western mountains. They've done this because the French have flown in air cargo planes filled with illegal weapons. The French are flagrantly violating the UN Security Council resolution, which imposes an arms embargo on all of Libya. But of course, Juppé, the unreconstructed French imperialist in the Suez tradition, he says, no, we can do whatever we want. I don't see how they're going to make progress once they get down into the plain, because when you get into this area of Tripoli with the 2 million people in Tripoli and 2 million Kalashnikovs, and I don't know how many bazookas and God knows what else, I don't see this going anywhere. Let's assume that it did, though. Suppose the rebels make gains and start taking over cities. What are they going to do? They're going to start doing what they do best, which is to massacre and to rape. There is now a study group in Tripoli, which is essentially women lawyers from Libya who have taken sworn testimony from Libyan women who are rape victims of the rebels, the side of this that you have not heard. And this is going to come out. And they're actually an international committee operating there, which is going to promote this. So, if the rebels advance, the natural result is that under the United Nations Charter, under the United Nations resolution, which violates the Charter, but under the resolution, let's take the resolution, it would be necessary to carry out airstrikes against the rebels. To protect civilians, you'd have to do airstrikes against the rebels. Now, the United States, Britain, France, Italy won't do airstrikes against the rebels, but maybe somebody else will. You could, indeed, some other country could say, well, I'm Iran, or I'm Russia, or I'm China, or I'm Brazil, or who knows what could happen. Somebody might come forward and say, I'm another country, I read the UN Security Council resolution in a different way, and it's now my responsibility to carry out airstrikes against these rebels because the rebels are threatening genocide against civilians. So that, I think, is the root of this National Public Radio story and Washington Post story of today. So that, I would say, is the current situation in Libya. Stay tuned on Libya. There will be more in the coming weeks and months. Now let's go over to the domestic economic situation here in the United States. We are now approaching the various deadlines for the bankruptcy and default of the United States. This is being carried out by neo-feudal, proto-fascist and fascist forces, malefactors of great wealth. We know the people. We've been talking about them. The new versions of Krupp and Thyssen and Ops and people like this. And we have them here in Wall Street. Right now, there is a process of negotiation between Obama and the congressional leaders of both parties. And as we said, Obama is carrying out a policy of preventive capitulation. He is seeking the grand bargain with Obama, the $4 trillion of genocidal budget cuts over the next 10 years. I would call it the grand sellout. It is, of course, that the Republicans hate the Constitution. We'll show you how much the Republicans hate the Constitution. Indeed, the Tea Party that makes such a big deal about the Constitution, they hate it. They're willing to shred the Constitution. The paper that they care about is not the U.S. Constitution. It's the anti-tax pledge that they have taken with this ultra-reactionary ideologue, Grover Norquist, who is the evil genius of so much, that goes on the Republican side. So this is the grand bargain. They will reconvene on Sunday, and what we need is simply, here again, a barrage of negative comment. Hands off Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. No cuts. I think this is a point where people should very well write to their congressman and say, Dear Congressman, if you vote to cut Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security for any reason, in any context, you will have a primary opponent, and if you don't have one, I'll make sure you have one because I will come forward. And you can make that kind of a statement right now so that they know. And to be primaried for a lot of them, no matter how weak the primary challenge may be, is a tremendous problem. Now, Pelosi says no entitlement cuts for Social Security and Medicare. She didn't mention Medicaid. Medicaid is a very important program for the middle class. This is if you have to go into a nursing home, you got Alzheimer's, if you don't want to die in the street or under the bridge, that's Medicaid that helps you there. So obviously we have to, hope that there is no common ground, right? There is no common ground between the Tea Party extremists who say no tax increases and the people, the 70 or so progressive Democrats who say no cuts to entitlement. So we'll see where this goes. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.